Hello, everyone. Welcome to Election Future. Kamala Harris is finished. As someone who accurately predicted Joe Biden's victory in 2020 by the exact 306 to 232 electoral vote margin, I am here to tell you that Kamala Harris has lost the 2024 election, and she knows it. Compared to Biden in 2020, her performance has been abysmal. 4 years ago, Joe Biden was on track to win states like North Carolina, Florida, and maybe even Texas and Ohio. According to the pollsters today, they have her losing the election entirely, which is especially concerning because Trump is always underestimated in these polls. In the last few days, we've seen a string of polls from the Trafalgar Group and Insider Advantage. They polled all 7 of the swing states, which are, of course, Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. The findings are really interesting. In the 3 Rust Belt states which were polled by the Trafalgar Group, Trump leads in every single one. He's ahead by 2% in Michigan, a state he lost by nearly 3 points to Joe Biden 4 years ago. In Wisconsin, he's ahead by 1%. This state is generally the most conservative of the 3 blue wall states, but that might change this time. Trump is at 47% and Harris is at 46%. In Pennsylvania, arguably the most important state on the map, Trump leads by a whopping 3 points, 48% to Harris's 45%. If the vice president loses this state by even 0.1%, she will have no realistic pathways to the presidency. In the remaining 4 states, things don't get much better for Harris. The only poll in which she's not losing is the Insider Advantage poll from Georgia, where Harris and Trump are tied at 48% each. We have an even race there. In North Carolina, Nevada, and Arizona, Trump leads by 1%. Now, you might look at these numbers and say that Trump's lead is pretty small in virtually every one of these states. Michigan and Pennsylvania are currently leaning red based on these polls. Wisconsin is going to be a tilt red, while the remaining states are also tilting red. However, we have to consider the polling error. Pollsters have always underestimated support for Trump, which is why he is in a much better position than the raw data suggests. For example, in Wisconsin, Joe Biden was on track to win the state by a whopping 8.4% in 2020. It was supposed to be a landslide, especially considering Trump had won the state just 4 years prior. Biden was never behind in the polling average after April of 2020. He consistently held a lead, and he surged at the very end. In the final week, his lead went from 6.5% to 8.4%. However, in the end, people were surprised by just how narrow his victory was. Biden only won Wisconsin by 0.63 percentage points. In fact, Biden's victory in Wisconsin in 2020 was weaker than Trump's victory over Hillary Clinton in 2016. So, today, if Trump leads by 1% in the polls and is underestimated again by 8 points, Wisconsin would be a likely red state. The polling data currently shows Wisconsin as a tilt state, but Trump could likely win by a much larger margin if the polls are as inaccurate as they were in 2020. Wisconsin is probably going to be more competitive than this, but for now, just for the sake of illustrating how good of a position Trump is in, if the polls are equally wrong as they were between Biden and Trump, Trump could win Wisconsin by 7 points or more against Kamala Harris. That would be a significant shift. In Michigan, Biden was supposed to win by 7.9%, once again a large margin. Trump surged a little bit in the end, and at one point, polling had Biden winning by nearly double digits. However, the margin dropped to under 8 points. In the end, Biden carried Michigan by only 2.8%. The polling here wasn't as wrong as it was in Wisconsin, but it still underestimated Trump by a whopping 5 points. That's quite a bit when you consider the fact that the state was decided by only half of that 5-point error. If the polling underestimates Trump by 5 points again in this election against Kamala Harris, Trump will win Michigan by 7 points, making it another likely red state. Today, Trump already leads by 2 points in the polling average, and if you add 5 more points, Trump already leads by 2 points in the polling average today. If you add 5 more points to that, it would push the state into likely red territory. Before we continue to Pennsylvania, 80% of you guys are not subscribed, so please take a moment to subscribe now for more content like this leading up to the election in November, and join my Discord server to chat with me personally. The link is in the description below. Now, in Pennsylvania, the polls were slightly more accurate. Joe Biden was supposed to win by 4.7%, and in the end, he won the state by 1.2%, meaning the polls overestimated him by 3.5%. This isn't as bad as in Michigan or Wisconsin, but they still underestimated Trump. Looking at Trump's current 3-point margin in Pennsylvania, adding an additional 3.5% would put Trump on track to win the Keystone State by 6.5%, which would still be within the lean range. However, it would be a dominant victory for the former president in what is arguably the most important state on the map. Moving on to the 4 Sunbelt states, I will say that polling has generally been more accurate here than it was in the northern states, but they still tend to overestimate Democrats. Looking at the polling in Georgia, this state was probably the most accurately polled among the competitive states. In Georgia, Joe Biden was predicted to win by 1.2% in 2020, and the actual result missed by just 1%. Biden eventually won the Peach State by 0.24%, becoming the first Democrat to carry Georgia since Bill Clinton in 1992. So, while the polls predicted his victory, they still overestimated his margin. Looking at Trump's performance today, we see a tie between Harris and Trump. If Trump is again underestimated by 1%, Georgia will remain a tilt-red state. Again, this is for illustrative purposes. We'll revisit the map later in the video. Moving on to North Carolina, this was a state many people were confident Biden would win in the last election. People were surprised that Georgia went to Biden, but not North Carolina. Throughout the 2020 election cycle, there wasn't a single point where Trump led over Biden. The Tar Heel state was expected to flip to the Democrats as they hadn't won it since 2008. Biden seemed poised to win it, but the reason he lost was likely due to Cal Cunningham, the Senate candidate, who was caught in a scandal for cheating on his wife. This October surprise for Democrats probably contributed to Biden's loss. The polls overestimated Biden by nearly 3%, and Trump eventually won North Carolina by 1.3%. Today, it remains the only state Trump has won in both 2016 and 2020 out of the 7 competitive states. It's unlikely Trump will lose North Carolina this time. If the polls underestimate him by 3 points again, he will win by 4%, making North Carolina a lean red state. Next, in Nevada, the polling wasn't terrible, but it did overestimate Biden by 3 points. According to the data, Biden was supposed to win by 5.3%, but he eventually defeated Trump by 2.4%, the same margin Hillary Clinton won by in 2016. While the country shifted left from 2016 to 2020, Nevada stayed the same, signaling the state's general trend toward the GOP. In 2022, Nevada elected a Republican governor in a narrow election. Today, Trump has a good chance of becoming the first Republican to win Nevada since George W. Bush in 2004. This would be a monumental flip for Trump. Looking at current polling, Trump leads by 1%. Adjusting for the 2020 polling error, he is on track to carry Nevada by 4 points, making it another lean red state. Finally, in Arizona, the polling wasn't terrible, but it did overestimate Democrats. In 2020, Biden was supposed to win Arizona by 2.6%. And while they correctly predicted his victory, he won by only 0.31%. So, the polling was a little off. They did predict the outcome, but not how competitive the state would be. If we adjust this 2-point polling error and add it to Trump's current 1% lead, Trump would lead Harris by 3 points. This makes Arizona another lean red state. So, based on the new polling data and adjusting for the general error seen in the 2020 polling, Trump appears poised to decisively defeat Kamala Harris in all of the swing states. Without those swing states, Harris has no realistic pathway to victory. We're now going to fill in the rest of the map so you can see which states Trump really needs and which ones are just accessories. I'll start by filling in the solid and likely states for both candidates. These are states that really won't be too competitive, where one candidate has a clear advantage over the other. Trump is essentially going to win all the states in the middle of the country, as he has in the last 2 election cycles. There's not going to be much drama there. In 2020, states like Texas, Florida, Iowa, and Ohio were considered competitive, but that's no longer the case. Trump is expected to easily win those races. With all the solid and likely states filled in, Harris sits at 191 electoral votes. After removing the 7 swing states, Trump is at 219. So, at this point, with just the competitive states remaining, Trump is only 51 electoral votes away from the presidency. Next, we'll fill in the lean states, which are likely to go one way or the other. New Mexico, Minnesota, New Hampshire, and Maine's 2nd District are all leaning blue, as well as Nebraska's 2nd District. This leaves us with 7 swing states and Virginia, which are generally considered the most competitive. These remaining states represent 106 electoral votes, but they hold all the power in determining the election outcome. Let's start with Virginia, which will probably lean slightly toward Harris. Democrats have a long history of winning the state, and they haven't lost it since 2004. However, Virginia isn't going to be decisive. If Virginia goes red, there's almost no way Trump loses the election. If it goes blue, it doesn't change the math much. Now, we're left with the 7 states polled by the Trafalgar Group and Insider Advantage. Based on this data, Trump is in a strong position to secure over 270 electoral votes. The easiest path for him would be through Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia. Winning just those 3 of the 7 swing states would give Trump exactly 270 without even needing Nebraska's 2nd district. However, that's probably not the most likely scenario. In terms of what's most likely to happen, Trump will probably win Arizona first among the swing states. Arizona has actually become the most conservative, with Trump polling better there than in Pennsylvania, North Carolina, or Georgia. Trump is also expected to win North Carolina and Georgia before taking any Midwestern states. This would put him at 262 electoral votes. At that point, Trump only needs to win one of the 3 Midwestern states. Currently, Trump is performing best in Pennsylvania, which has been shifting to the right. Since Kamala Harris chose Tim Walz as her running mate, Walz's impact will be felt more in rural Michigan and Wisconsin, but not as much in Pennsylvania. So, Pennsylvania is likely to be the state that puts Trump over 270, and I'm projecting it to be lean red. At this point, Trump has already secured enough electoral votes to win the election. However, he could still win additional states. I currently have Wisconsin, Michigan, and Nevada leaning red as well. These are going to be close races, and I wouldn't be surprised if Harris wins some of them. If she wins any, it would likely be Michigan first, followed by Nevada, and then Wisconsin. But even if she wins all 3, she still wouldn't have enough to win the election. Even winning Arizona wouldn't change the outcome. Trump would still win. This highlights just how strong of a position Trump is in right now. In both 2016 and 2020, the polls consistently predicted that Trump would lose. In 2016, Trump flipped 6 states, 5 in the Midwest, all except Minnesota and Illinois, and Florida. In 2020, Biden was expected to win in a landslide, but in the end, he barely won. Biden's victories in Wisconsin, Georgia, and Arizona were crucial to getting him over 270 electoral votes. Without those 3 states, he would have lost the election. Even though Biden won 306 electoral votes in 2020, it was an extremely close election, decided by razor-thin margins in a few key states. Today, things are different. For the first time, Trump is leading in the polls. According to Real Clear Politics, Trump currently has 281 electoral votes, while Harris and Walz have 257. Polls are essentially tied in Nevada, Wisconsin, and Michigan, but these states have historically overestimated Democratic support. In light of this new data, Trump is in a very strong position to win. J.D. Vance's strong performance against Tim Walz in the vice presidential debate, which is likely to be the last debate of the cycle, has cemented Trump's path to victory. He is poised to return to the White House as the 47th president, and I can realistically see him winning up to 312 electoral votes. In November will apparently be very exciting. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and like the video, and turn on the notification bell. See you in the next video.